My name is Edith Langley. I'm 76 years old and 6 months ago, I woke up on the floor of my living room, paralyzed on my right side, soaked in spilled tea and unable to scream loud enough for anyone to hear. Not that anyone would have come, because by then my children had already made their choice. My daughter Paige and my son Martin said it gently at first. You'll be better in assisted living, Mom. You need 24-hour care. But I knew what it really meant. They were tired. Tired of my slow speech. Tired of the smell of ointment and pills. Tired of seeing me broken and heavy. So they dropped me off at Maple Pine Home for recovery and signed a few papers. That was the last time either of them looked me in the eyes. It was quiet in that place. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that hums in your ears until you want to scream. The nurses were kind enough but rushed. They spoke around me like I wasn't there. And in that dull silence, with a brace on my leg and slurred words I couldn't control, I made a decision. If no one was coming for me, I would come for myself. The day I decided to walk again, it was raining. I remember because the clouds outside looked like they were weeping for me. My room smelled like bleach and cold mashed potatoes. I dragged my legs out of bed. It took 20 minutes. The floor was cold. My right foot refused to listen. But my left foot, oh, she remembered. She still had fight in her. Come on, I whispered to the one side of my body that still listened. Help me teach the other. I stood for 3 seconds. I collapsed. But it was the first time since my stroke that I'd felt like Edith again. Not just a patient. And here's what I didn't know then. They thought I'd never make it. They thought they'd buried me alive in silence. But I wasn't done. And I would rise. That was 6 months ago. Now I'm standing at the top of the stairs of my daughter's home, the one she never invited me back to. Today I'm walking in, unannounced, unaided, and I'm not asking for permission. I'm taking back everything they left behind. Want to know what happened between that floor and this front door? Let me take you there. If you believe in strength after silence, in love that rises from the floor, please like, comment, and subscribe. Someone out there needs this story. Maybe it's you. The first time I held a spoon again, I dropped it. The second time, my hand shook so violently the oatmeal flew across the room and splattered on the curtain. But on the third morning, I managed to bring it to my mouth. Half a scoop, cold, bland, and thick. You'd think I'd won the lottery by the way I cried. Because that bite didn't just feed my body, it fed my will. The doctors said recovery would be slow. One even used the word unlikely. Said my age worked against me. Said most people don't regain full independence. I smiled and said, well, most people aren't Edith Langley. They wrote that down in my chart like it was a symptom. The day my daughter Paige signed me over to Maple Pine, she held my hand and cried. I love you, Mama. This is for your own good. But when I begged her not to leave me, her eyes shifted. She turned and walked away. Her husband, Mark, didn't even say goodbye. Martin didn't come that day. He called later. Left a voicemail. Hope you settle in okay, Mom. It's what you need right now. He didn't visit. Not once. They'd made their choice. They gave me a bed with rails, a buzzer I couldn't reach, and a clock on the wall that never ticked fast enough. And I made mine. I would recover. Alone. There was a woman across the hall named Miss Thelma. 82 years old. Mostly blind, sharp as a knife. She heard me fall one morning and yelled so loud a nurse came running. Stop trying to walk, the nurse scolded. Thelma snorted from across the hallway. Don't listen to her, Edith. Fall if you must. But fall forward. So I did. Every day. Fall, wobble, curse, try again. My legs grew stronger. My grip returned. The words in my mouth stopped slurring like syrup and started sounding like sentences. At night, I'd sit up in bed and whisper my own name over and over like a prayer. Edith. 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 Not patient. Not liability. Not burden. Edith. 3 weeks into my stay, I asked the staff if I could use the therapy room outside my assigned sessions. The receptionist looked at me like I was crazy. We can't allow that, ma'am. You'd need approval from your physician. So I asked the physician. He said no. So I started using my own room like a gym. The footboard on the bed became a pull-up bar. The towel rack became a balance beam. I stacked books on the floor and stepped over them like hurdles. The nurses thought I was losing my mind. Maybe I was. But I'd rather be a mad woman in motion than a sane woman rotting in stillness. One afternoon, as I shuffled slowly down the hallway using the wall for balance, I saw a little girl visiting her grandfather in the common area. She looked at me and gasped, "Mommy, that lady's walking without help." Her voice echoed like a bell. The grandfather smiled. "That's not just a lady. That's a warrior." No one had called me anything other than ma'am or sweetheart in weeks. That night I didn't sleep. I stayed up staring at the ceiling, whispering to myself, "You're a warrior. You're a warrior. You're a warrior." I didn't tell Paige or Martin about my progress. Why should I? They had made me invisible. So I gave them what they wanted. Silence. But silence doesn't mean surrender. It means you're working in the dark. Preparing. One day I got my hands on a staff member's schedule. Not to break rules, but to find time when the hallway would be empty. I waited until Thursday morning just after breakfast. Then I stood up. No walker. No cane. I walked, slow and sure, from one end of the hallway to the other. 36 steps. Alone. No witnesses. No applause. Just the sound of my breath and the thud of each foot touching floor. But I cried anyway, because that hallway used to feel like a prison. Now it felt like a runway. And I was ready to take off. That afternoon I called a cab, paid with my own pension check, packed my small suitcase, left a note on the bed. Gone walking. Edith Langley. And just like that I left Maple Pine behind. No one stopped me. No one even noticed. Because no one thought the woman who came in on a stretcher would walk out on her own. But I did. Now I was on my way back home, not to beg for a seat at the table but to reclaim what I built. And when Paige opens that door and sees me standing there, upright, steady, uninvited, she's going to realize the one thing she never expected. I'm not her problem. I am her proof. Her proof that strength doesn't age. That silence doesn't mean weakness. And that a mother left alone can still rise, step by step. Paige lives in a modern brick colonial at the end of a winding cul-de-sac in a quiet Virginia suburb. I bought her first couch, paid her down payment, painted the nursery when she was pregnant with her second child. And yet, when I stood on her porch that afternoon, suitcase in hand, my name wasn't even listed on the doorbell directory. She wasn't expecting me. Good. I rang the bell. The silence on the other side was thick and I almost turned away. Not out of fear. Out of habit. The kind of habit women like me develop after a lifetime of giving more than they receive. But I stayed. I straightened my shoulders and adjusted my coat. The door opened. Paige stared at me like she was seeing a ghost. "Mama?" I looked her straight in the eye. "Hi, Paige." She stepped outside, pulling the door half closed behind her. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "Walking." She looked me over, head to toe, searching for a cane, a wheelchair, a companion. I had none. I smiled. Surprised. She didn't answer. I wasn't here to move in. I didn't want her couch or her pity. I wanted her to see me. The woman who once sat on the floor of her living room unable to move her hand. The woman she abandoned. The woman who taught herself to walk again, not out of pride but out of promise. "I thought you were still in rehab," she finally said. "I was," I replied. "Until I wasn't." She nodded slowly, stunned into silence. I didn't ask to come in. Instead I asked if her daughter, my granddaughter, was home. "No," she said. "She's at piano." I nodded. "That's good. You always loved piano too. Before life got so loud." Paige looked down at her feet. "Mama, it wasn't easy for me either. You had a stroke. You couldn't talk. You couldn't move. We didn't know what to do. You left," I said plainly. "I left you in care." "No, you left me in silence." She swallowed hard. I thought I was doing what was best. I took a breath. And then I said something I hadn't planned to say. "Paige, I forgive you." She blinked. "But I don't need you to fix it," I added. "I just needed you to see me." She opened the door wider. "Do you want to come in?" I shook my head. "Not yet." She looked confused. "I'm not done walking." I turned and walked back down the steps. Slow, steady, no stumble. I left her standing in the doorway watching me. I stayed the night at the old Econo Lodge off Highway 42. Room 104. Thin pillows, humming refrigerator, the smell of cheap soap. It felt more like freedom than anywhere else had in years. The next morning I called Martin. He didn't answer. So I left a message. Hi sweetheart. This is your mother. I walked out of recovery 2 days ago. I'm doing well. I'm not calling to ask for help. I'm calling to let you know I don't need it. That was it. At noon I took a bus into town. Sat on a park bench. Watched children laugh and pigeons fight over bread crusts. I smiled at an old man reading a paperback novel upside down. He winked at me. I felt alive again. When I got back to the motel there was a note slipped under my door. It wasn't from Paige or Martin. It was from Sarah, my granddaughter. She'd seen me from the upstairs window when I visited. She had scribbled on notebook paper in big curly letters. Grandma, I saw you. You were walking. Can I see you again? I missed you. I clutched the note to my chest and wept. Not because I was sad. Because finally, someone saw me. Really saw me. And that child, that girl with piano fingers and my stubborn eyes, would not grow up thinking her grandma disappeared. He would know the truth. That her grandmother walked her way back from nothing. Alone. Later that night, I pulled out a blank page from the motel desk drawer and began to write. Dear Sarah, I'm going to tell you a story. Not the one they told you. It starts on the day my body gave up, but my spirit didn't. That letter would be the first of many. A series of stories, one by one, for the next generation. Because even if your children cut you off, the truth will always find a way to bloom. Through the cracks, through the silence, through the girls watching from windows. The next morning, I folded Sarah's note carefully and tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat. I didn't have many things left that felt like mine, but that paper, those 8 little words, felt like gold. At breakfast, the woman at the motel front desk asked if I needed anything. I told her I just needed a map. A real one. The kind you unfold on a table and trace with your finger. I'm looking for places I forgot, I said. She laughed like I was joking. But I wasn't. That afternoon I took the bus 2 towns over. My sister Eloise had lived there before she passed. We hadn't spoken in 5 years. Not because of hate but because of distance and pride. She died before I could say sorry. I walked past her old white house, still standing. The shutters were faded, but the roses she planted were wild and blooming like they had no one to answer to. That made me smile. Across the street, a little girl sat on the steps drawing chalk hearts on the sidewalk. She looked up, saw me watching and waved. Want to draw one too? She asked. I walked over and took a piece of chalk from her small hand. I knelt down slowly, carefully, knees cracking, and drew a simple pink heart next to hers. That's for my sister, I whispered. The girl didn't ask questions. She just smiled and kept drawing. Sometimes strangers give you more grace than family ever did. That evening, back in my motel room, I opened a blank notebook and began writing again. This time not to Sarah. To myself. Edith, I wrote, you are not done. The next day I returned to Paige's neighborhood. Not to her door. To the elementary school 3 blocks away. I waited on the sidewalk until I saw Sarah come out, swinging her backpack and scanning the parking lot. When her eyes landed on me, they lit up. She ran straight to me and hugged me around the waist. You really did walk here, she whispered. I did, I said. All by myself. Mom says you're mad. I'm not mad, I said. I'm awake. She didn't fully understand, but she nodded like she did anyway. I handed her a small envelope. Inside was the first story I wrote her. Just a few pages. Handwritten. She clutched it to her chest like treasure. Don't lose that, I said. It's the truth. I won't. And just like that, the next part of me began to bloom. On paper, in her hands, in whatever came next. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I stayed at a small guest house run by a widow named Clarice. She offered me tea and a chair on the porch. We talked for 3 hours. She told me she'd been alone for 12 years and had grown used to silence. I told her I used to fear it, but now I wear it like armor. she said, "You don't sound like a woman who's been left behind." I said, but I didn't stay there. I spent the next few days walking more. To the park. To the diner where Walter once proposed over peach pie. To the library where I read my first poem aloud in high school. Everywhere I walked, I left a little bit of pain behind. And in its place, something stronger grew. Not forgiveness. Not even peace. But presence. The full knowledge that I was still here. That I still mattered. Even if my children didn't see it. One night I got a call. It was Martin. He didn't say, "I'm sorry." Not right away. He just said, "Sarah told me you're walking again." "I am." I didn't think. "You didn't think I'd want to live?" I said softly. There was a long pause. Then, "Can I see you?" I didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about giving him comfort. It was about asking myself, do I want to see him? I stared at the moon outside the guest house window. Looked just like the one that watched me from the floor of my living room the day I couldn't move. Except now it didn't look so far away. Martin met me at the town square the next morning. He pulled up in a sleek silver car I didn't recognize, stepped out wearing a suit and tired eyes, and looked around like he expected me to vanish. I was sitting on the bench beneath the big oak tree. The same bench where I once read him storybooks while he licked melted ice cream from his knuckles. He looked older than I remembered. Grayer. But I guess I did too. "Mom," he said quietly. I just nodded. He sat beside me slowly, like the weight of everything he hadn't said in months was sitting on his chest. "I didn't know how to come back from it," he finally said. "The day of your stroke I panicked. Paige was already making decisions and You let her," I said. He looked down at his hands. "I thought you'd be better in that place. Safer. Monitored." "You thought that," I said. "But you didn't ask me what I thought. Or wanted." He nodded. "You're right." There was a pause. The sound of wind in the trees, a dog barking across the square, a child's laughter in the distance. He glanced over at me. "I saw the picture Sarah took of you standing by her school. You looked like you again." "I am me again," I said. "The me I was before you, and Paige decided I was too broken to try." He swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to cut you off. You just didn't know how to carry me," I said. "So you dropped me." The truth was hard. But it wasn't cruel. "Not anymore. I want to do better," he said. "I believe you," I said. "But I don't need better from you. I needed better for me." We sat in silence after that. Not awkward. Just unfinished. Eventually he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "What's this?" I asked. "I've been writing. Just short entries. Nothing special. Stuff I wish I'd said before." I opened it. The first line read, "Dear Mom, I remember the night you stayed up with me when I had the flu. You slept in a chair just to keep my forehead cool. I never forgot that." My throat tightened. "I guess," he said, "it's never too late to try and say something right." "No," I said, "it's not." We didn't hug. But as he stood up, I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen since he was 10 years old. Regret and hope. That afternoon I returned to Clarice's guest house. She was waiting with hot biscuits and blackberry jam. "How'd it go?" she asked. "He's learning," I said. "Isn't it funny," she replied, "how children grow up and still forget to grow toward you?" I smiled. "Yes. But sometimes they turn around. And that's enough." That evening I got a message from Paige. She had attached a photo. It was of her and Sarah reading my letter together on the living room floor. Sarah was holding the paper like a treasure map. Paige's face was turned away from the camera, but her hand was on Sarah's back, steady, protective. The message read, "We've been reading your story every night. I didn't know how much I missed your voice until I saw it on the page. I'm listening now, Mama. I really am." I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the screen, heart heavy in a new kind of way, not broken but full. I had spoken. They had heard me. Not when I begged. Not when I was silent. But when I stood, alone, and told my story anyway. Later that night, Clarice and I sat on the porch sipping ginger tea. "You ever think of going back?" she asked. "To them?" To the old life. I shook my head. I'm not going back. I'm going forward. If they want to walk with me, they're welcome. But I won't wait at their doorstep again. She clinked her cup gently against mine. To forward. To forward, I said. In my room, I opened the notebook again. This time I wrote. The moment I stood up after falling was not the moment I was healed. It was the moment I was born again. Not into youth. Not into perfection. But into self-respect. I closed the book, stared at the ceiling and smiled. Because it's one thing to walk again. It's another to walk away and never look back. 2 days later, I woke to the sound of a knock on the guest house door. Clarice was already at the kitchen frying something that smelled like childhood, eggs and sausage in an old cast-iron skillet. She looked up at me wide-eyed. That knock's for you, she said. I opened the door slowly. It was Paige. Standing on the porch, holding a small box in her arms, eyes puffy like she hadn't slept in a day. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had just grown. I brought something, she said softly. I stepped aside and let her in. She placed the box on the table like it was made of glass. I wasn't sure what to bring, but I figured this was a start. Inside were old photographs. Me and her on her first day of school. One of us at a pumpkin patch. Another of me holding her newborn daughter, Sarah, wrapped in a pink blanket. She pulled out a folded quilt next. I found this in your closet, she said. The one you made after Daddy passed. It still smells like you. I touched the edge of it, traced the stitching with my fingers. She wasn't just bringing me objects. She was bringing me memory. And something else. Permission. We sat at the kitchen table, Clarice moving quietly in the background like a respectful ghost. Paige looked at me with trembling lips. You have every right not to forgive me, she said. I abandoned you. I didn't speak. I told myself I was doing what was best, but really, I was scared. Scared of watching you fade. I wasn't fading, I finally said. I was still here. I know that now. We sat in silence, two women wrapped in guilt, age, and blood. I started reading the stories you gave Sarah, she continued, and I realized I didn't know who you were anymore. And that was my fault. You didn't ask. She nodded, swallowing hard. I want to know now, she said. If you'll let me. Clarice excused herself and disappeared onto the porch. Paige stayed. All afternoon. We drank tea. Talked about her childhood. My marriage. My regrets. Her fears. Sarah's dreams. She cried. I didn't. Not because I wasn't moved, but because I'd already cried enough for both of us. By the time she left, she kissed me on the cheek for the first time in years. Will you come to Sarah's piano recital next month? She asked. If I'm free, I said with a smile. She smiled back. You're different now. No, I replied. I'm just no longer pretending. That night, I sat on the porch with Clarice. The stars were clear, scattered like stories across a night sky. She stayed a while, Clarice said. Yes. You letting her back in? I'm not letting anyone back in, I said. I'm simply leaving the door unlocked. If they want to walk through, they walk. If they don't, I still have me. Clarice nodded like a woman who understood that better than most. The next morning, I mailed a letter to Sarah. Not by email. Not a text. A real letter. With stamps. With ink. With time folded between every word. Instead I wrote, Dear Sarah, when people say, I walked again, they think it's about feet. But it's not. Walking again is about the day you stop waiting for someone to carry you. I told her about the motel, the bench, the guest house, the chalk heart I drew for Eloise. I told her that being strong didn't mean being angry. It meant being awake. At the end of the letter, I included a question. What is something you wish people knew about you but never asked? Because healing isn't just about telling your story. It's about helping others tell theirs too. That afternoon, I took a walk down Main Street. Alone. No cane. No hand to hold. Just me. The wind. And the soft thud of forward motion. A woman at the bakery smiled at me through the window. Another woman, older than me maybe, nodded from her porch like we shared some unspoken code. We did. Survivors of dismissal. Warriors of quiet. Women who rose, alone, and walked until someone noticed. Even if that someone was just themselves. I stopped at a bookstore. Picked up a blank journal. Red leather, stitched edges, creamy pages. I bought 2. One for me, one for Sarah. Sarah wrote back 2 days later. The envelope was bright yellow with a purple sticker sealing the flap. Her handwriting was lopsided but careful. Grandma, I wish people knew that just because I smile a lot doesn't mean I don't get scared too. I held the letter to my chest for a full minute before unfolding it again. There were little doodles in the corners, stars, hearts, a bird with too many feathers. She signed it, "Your walking warrior, Sarah." That girl was going to be something. No, not going to be. She already was. Later that afternoon, I returned to the little school where she had waved to me across the street. I waited by the gate, unsure if I'd be welcome. I didn't ask Paige's permission. I wasn't asking anyone's permission anymore. Sarah spotted me instantly. She came running. "Grandma, I showed my teacher your letter. She said you should write a book." I chuckled. "I think I already started one." She slipped her hand into mine without hesitation. "I've been writing too," she said proudly. "My teacher gave me a notebook. Red leather." She gasped. "How did you know?" "Call it grandma magic." We walked slowly to the bus stop together. Her small steps next to mine, her chatter bouncing from squirrels to school lunches to dreams about becoming a pilot. "I want to fly," she said. "Go far away. Like you did." "Then write it all down," I told her. "Every thought. Every fear. Every joy. Writing is how we remember that we matter." She nodded, holding my hand tighter. That night, I sat with Clarice again. We drank peppermint tea and listened to Billie Holiday hum through the record player in the corner. "I think you're healing them," she said out of nowhere. "Healing who?" "Your kids. Your granddaughter. Maybe even yourself." I thought about that. "I didn't set out to heal anyone," I said. "No, but that's the thing about healing," Clarice replied. "It spills." The next day Martin came to visit. No warning. Just knocked on the door holding a small tray of lemon bars. Store-bought. Neatly arranged. "I didn't know if you liked these," he said. "I made them every Easter when you were little." He blinked. "I forgot." We sat at the kitchen table. He ate too. I had one. They were too sweet, but I didn't say so. He told me about his work. His marriage. The way he sometimes wakes up at night wondering if he missed something important. I told him he probably had. But missing something doesn't mean you don't go back and look. Before he left, he pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I wrote something. He handed it to me. It was a story. About the day he broke his arm falling off his bike and I carried him a mile to the car because no one else was home. The last line said, "She wasn't strong because she wanted to be. She was strong because no one gave her a choice." I see that now. I didn't cry. But I folded the paper gently like it was something living. That night, Clarice asked if I ever planned to go back to my house. "The one you left before the stroke." "I'm not sure," I said. "Why not?" "Because that house held a version of me I don't live in anymore." I wasn't the woman who stood in the kitchen, waiting on phone calls and visits and birthday invitations that never came. I wasn't the woman who sat in silence while her body failed. I was the woman who walked again, who wrote again, who got letters from a granddaughter who now believed in her more than anyone else. A few days later, Sarah asked if she could stay with me for a weekend. Paige agreed. She dropped her off at the guest house on a Friday night, kissed her forehead and gave me a long, unreadable look. "I'll see you Sunday," she said. Not, "Call me if something goes wrong." Not, "She needs to take her vitamins." Just, "See you Sunday." That was trust. That was something. Sarah and I spent Saturday morning baking lemon bars the way I remembered. Real zest, real butter, real mess. She read me her new story. It was about a girl whose grandmother teaches her to walk through fire barefoot without getting burned. I told her that story sounded familiar. She said, "It's because you lived it." Later she asked if she could record me reading one of my letters aloud. "For when you're not here someday," she said shyly. I said yes. Because strength is not in holding back. It's in leaving pieces of yourself behind so no one forgets. Not this time. Not ever. On Sunday afternoon when Paige arrived to pick up Sarah, she didn't honk the horn. She parked, got out and walked to the door. Clarice opened it before I could reach it. Paige gave her a small smile. "Hi. I'm here for Sarah." Clarice gestured toward the back porch. "They're in the garden." Paige looked surprised. "Garden? She's planting lavender," Clarice said. "Wants to start something that blooms later." That made me smile. She found us kneeling in the soil. My hands in gloves, Sarah's tiny fingers covered in dirt. Both of us laughing at how crooked our rows had turned out. "You're growing things now?" Paige asked gently. "Always have," I said. "Just stopped calling it that." She crouched beside us and for a moment, the three of us knelt in silence, surrounded by little buds of possibility. That night, long after they'd left, I sat in the porch rocker watching the wind sway the petals. Clarice came out with 2 mugs of cocoa and a quiet look on her face. "You okay?" she asked. "I think so. I've been meaning to ask," she said after a pause. "Why did you never go back to that house?" I rocked for a bit before answering. Because that house was full of memories that kept asking me to disappear. I wanted to grow somewhere I could be fully seen. Clarice nodded. "And this place?" "This place," I said, "saw me crawl out of my own grief and stand again. That makes it sacred." A few days later, I received a call from a small publishing press. Someone from the local paper had shared one of my letters, and somehow it made its way across the state. "We'd love to publish your collection," the woman on the phone said. "There's something raw and necessary in your words." "Necessary?" I repeated. "Yes. Too many people die with their stories still inside them." I looked over at the notebook on my table, now nearly filled cover to cover. I said yes. Not because I needed to be published, but because someone needed to read it. When I told Sarah, she gasped. "Can I help with the title?" "Of course." She thought for a long time, scribbled on scrap paper, scratched her head dramatically, then said, "How about Walking Letters?" I laughed. "That's perfect." A month later, I held my first printed copy in my hands. Red binding. Gold lettering. A photo of a single suitcase on the front. Martin came to the book signing. He brought his son, my other grandchild, who was barely 2 the last time I held him. They both waited in line just like everyone else. When they got to the front, Martin leaned in and whispered, "I'm sorry it took a book for me to see you." I smiled. "Better a book than never." He nodded. "You're still strong." "I never stopped being strong," I said. "I just stopped asking people to notice." Paige didn't come that day. But that evening I found a message in my inbox. A photo of her holding the book, tear stains on the page. She wrote, "I'm reading it slowly. Every word feels like you're speaking to me from across time. I hear you now. I really do." That night I went for a walk. Just me and the moon, like the night I first left Maple Pine. Except now I wasn't running away. I was walking into the life I built for myself. One letter at a time. One step at a time. Back at the guest house, Clarice handed me a glass of wine. "To the walking warrior," she said. I clinked her glass gently. "To the stories we lived through just to write them down." She smiled. "And to the granddaughters who will never forget us." We raised our glasses again. Because some stories aren't written for fame or pity. They're written so a woman, left behind, silenced, dismissed, can stand tall in her own words. And let the world know. She walked again. And this time she walked with purpose. I visited Maple Pine one last time. It wasn't planned. I was driving past on the way to the post office when I saw the old sign swaying in the wind. Maple Pine Home for Recovery, just as dull and gray as I remembered. Something inside me said, "Go in." So I did. The front desk still smelled like powdered soap and artificial air freshener. The same receptionist sat behind the counter, only this time she looked up with surprise. "Miss Langley." "That's me." Left so suddenly. No discharge papers. No call. "I didn't leave," I said. "I walked out." She stared at me, unsure what to say. I walked past her and down the hallway. Each step echoed with memory. The place where I fell. The towel bar I once clung to. The exact spot in the hallway where I took my first full steps without help. I passed my old room. The bed was empty now. Sterile. Quiet. But I could still see her, me, lying there, gripping the edges of her own name like a life raft. And I smiled. Because I didn't hate that woman. I loved her. She was the version of me who decided to stand. I left a copy of my book at the front desk. To room 6, I wrote on the inside cover. In case she needs a reason to believe she still can. The receptionist nodded, still stunned silent. I walked out with my head high and my shoulders relaxed. And not once did I look back. That evening, Sarah and I planted the lavender seedlings we'd been growing in little pots on the windowsill. She wore her gardening gloves. I wore mine. The dirt was soft, the light golden, the air full of something that felt like tomorrow. I told my teacher you used to live in a rehab center, Sarah said, and that you walked out by yourself. She said that's impossible. I smiled. Then she doesn't know your grandma. I told her I want to write stories like you, she added. I looked over at her, knees in the dirt, hair in her eyes, face shining. You will, I said. But your stories will be your own. Not mine. She nodded. But I'll start with yours. That did something to me. It rooted me in a way no home ever had. Later, after she fell asleep on the guest house couch, curled up with a blanket and a book, I pulled out my old journal. Just one page left. I wrote, if you're reading this and you've ever been told you're too old, too broken, too slow, stand up anyway. Even if it's one step. Even if you fall again. Because the miracle isn't walking perfectly. It's walking despite every reason not to. The next morning, I got a call from a university library. They wanted to archive my letters as part of their Women's Legacy collection. We believe in preserving the voices of the quiet heroes, the caller said. I laughed. I was never quiet. I was just ignored. Exactly, she said. That's why we need your words. Later that day, Paige sent me a message. A photo of a letter she had written. To her future self. Read. If I ever forget who my mother became, remind me. She walked through the fire I built and came out blooming. I stared at those words for a long time. Then I whispered to the silence. She sees me now. And that was enough. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon when I gave my first speech. Not at a bookstore or a fancy conference. At Sarah's school. Her teacher had read Walking Letters after Sarah proudly brought it in and asked if I would visit. Talk to the class. Share how to be brave even when you're scared. I didn't wear anything fancy. Just my lavender scarf and the red cardigan I used to wear when reading bedtime stories. The classroom was decorated with glitter stars and hand-drawn posters. The chairs were tiny. The children's eyes were wide. Sarah introduced me herself. This is my grandma. She taught herself to walk again. But she also taught me that your voice doesn't get quieter when you get older. Only deeper. I stood in front of them, heart pounding, not from nerves but from purpose. I want to tell you something, I began. You don't have to wait until you're older to tell the truth. And you don't have to wait until someone listens to speak. They listened. All of them. Even the wiggly boy in the back. Even the girl chewing her sleeve. When I finished, they clapped. But the part that broke me was this. When Sarah ran up and hugged me so tightly I nearly lost my breath and whispered, I'm going to write letters too. She already had. That night, I sat on the porch of the guest house with Clarice. We didn't say much. Just rocked side by side, the sound of crickets and memories between us. You feel done? She asked softly. No, I said. I feel open. She nodded. Good. I looked out at the garden. The lavender was taller now. The sprouts had turned into stalks, proud and swaying. Funny, I said. I thought this story would end with me proving something. And did it? No, I smiled. It ended with me not needing to. A few weeks later I got a call. Not from Paige. Not from Martin. From a woman in Kansas. 71 years old. She'd read my book in a hospital waiting room while recovering from hip surgery. I just wanted to say, she told me through tears, you reminded me I still matter. I didn't know what to say, so I just said the truth. You always did. The next spring, Sarah stood at her school assembly and read one of her own letters out loud. It was about the lavender garden. About her grandma who walked out of a rehab center alone. About the power of writing things down so you never forget you were here. The entire room stood. And I cried. Because legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's who keeps telling your story when you're gone. 1 year after I left Maple Pine, I returned. Again. Not as a patient. Not even as a visitor. As a speaker. They asked me to speak to the new residents. To the families who sit quietly in lobbies unsure if their mother or father will ever be themselves again. I stood in front of a circle of wheelchairs and hopeful eyes and said, I couldn't speak. I couldn't walk. But I was still me. And if you can hold on to that truth, just that one thread, you can climb out of anything. And then I handed out blank journals. Each one with a note inside. Don't let them write your ending. Write it yourself. Today I walked 2 miles. I sent Sarah a letter. Started a new story. This one's called The Woman Who Didn't Ask for a Second Chance. She took it. Because I didn't survive to be silent. I walked again. And this time, I danced. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. What's one thing you've done even when no one believed you could? Let's honor the Ediths of this world.